Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Innovation Conversation. Today we are joined by Alon Bochman. Did I completely mispronounce it? Bochman?
All good. Nice to meet you, Ricardo.
Nice to meet you too. Alan, thank you so much for being here and being one of our guests in the podcast. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Sure. Let's see. I've had about a 30-year career. I co-founded and sold a software company to Thomson Reuters. I was a hedge fund portfolio manager. I built a practice selling AI to asset managers, consulting practice. I spent 3, 4 years in big tech at Microsoft and Google. Was most recently head of AI at a company called FactSet, and just recently left about a month and a half ago to explore a startup project.
I have so many questions lined up. It's absolutely crazy. One of the things we normally like to ask in the podcast, it's about your own journey as an entrepreneur. So how hard was it? Because you sold the company a couple of years ago. So how hard was it to get started, to get funding? Did you get any funding? So do you want to tell us a bit more about that journey? Because you are a very successful entrepreneur, right? Not everyone can actually go through an exit and an exit to Thomson Reuters, right? So it's not an easy thing. So do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Thank you, Ricardo. Every journey, entrepreneurial journey that I have is completely different. I haven't cracked the code yet, but I can tell you about my first one, and it was pretty amazing. I was a couple of years out of college, and I got together with a few uh, a few contacts through Family Connection, and they were just getting started, and so it was me and maybe one or two other co-founders, and uh, we were just in an empty office, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And we started out bootstrapping, and the bootstrapping recipe that I'm familiar with is to do consulting. So back then, my background was in web design. I had worked for this early web design leader called agency.com. They did the first website for American Express and for Hitachi and for a few other major brands. And my partner came from Microsoft. He was pretty senior in the consulting organization there. And our idea was that we would make something that merges the beauty of web design and the software depth of the Microsoft way of building software. This was back in like 1994, 95. And we would try to kind of build websites that are not just skin deep, but actually functional. And that worked out pretty well. Um, we got the first few clients through just outreach to our networks. And then we actually connected, we partnered with the Microsoft Consulting Organization, which, just sort of by way of background, back then and still now, consulting is a very small part of Microsoft's business. They don't really especially like to do consulting. It's less profitable than building software. And so back then, Microsoft demand for Microsoft was booming. This was, like just after, Windows 95 was released and all this other stuff. And the consulting organization in New York was just getting hammered. There was just way, way too many requests. And so we were like the Statue of Liberty. There's a plaque in the Statue of Liberty that says, "Give me your poor and wretched masses." So we said, give me all your clients that don't pay the bills. They have unreasonable expectations. They are pain to work with. There's scope creep. All the ones that you don't like working with, and you will never hear from them again. That was our pitch. And it worked. We got a couple of referrals from Microsoft Consulting, and we took care of them, and that became kind of the early start to our business. And then over time, it turned out that a couple of our clients requested substantially the same thing, and that thing was anyway. So it was my role to I basically I noticed it. I wrote a memo about it, and I said, you know what? We can keep doing consulting, but it would be even better if we had a product,
Mhm.
because that would be a nice complement to our business, and it'd be really cool to build it, and it would be profitable. And so I I guess became the product person, and I took that product from the memo to where it became something like 70% of the revenue of the company,
Wow.
and the reason why we got acquired. And that product would, it would now be called social networking, but back then there's no such thing. That label didn't exist, so we called it bulletin boards or community.
Okay.
And there's also no software as a service. We shipped it as a CD. So
See,
it'd be
I
like,
remember those. I remember like
right,
CD-ROMs, Windows 95.
that's right. So you pop the CD on your server, and
Uh-huh.
you get all these features, and it was a lot cheaper than having to sort of build those things yourself. Like the moment that we hit real sort of product market fit, it was kind of interesting because we were it's not that we were limping along, but we were chugging along. There wasn't anything special. And then the dot-com wave hit, and all these companies raised money, and you raise money. The VC tells you there's a checklist of things you have to do, and usually number two or three item on that checklist is build a community around your website, or around whatever you do. You need a community around it. And so back then there was just no software to do that. And our pitch to all of these entrepreneurs was, we'll help you take number three off your checklist, and you'll spend, say, $250,000 instead of $1 million, and you'll spend like 30 days instead of 6 months to build it, and it's going to work better than whatever you're going to build in 6 months.
Because
So
software back then was super expensive, right? To actually write all these
yeah,
code.
it was enterprise grade software, and it was built for scale. So some of our clients, our software powered. There was when CNBC launched their first website, and they had discussions about stocks, that was using our software. When So it was maybe 20,000 discussion boards about each security. When Healthy on WebMD launched, and they had discussions with doctors online, that was using our software. So we tried to build software that was really high quality, that would scale quite a bit, it would be fast.
So I mean that's an incredible story because I think people can only aspire to have been there when it was kind of exploding, right? So just before the dot com and then catching all the dot com and then that massive explosion that happened and then everyone would kind of I wouldn't say started having a personal computer, but they did start having access to the internet and started using the internet quite a lot, right? In the beginning of 2000, so it's really the time to be alive, I guess. And how right now I know you're quite active in the AI. How did you transition from having your own company, then selling the company, and then how do you progress towards AI? Because it's not new for you. You have been in space for much longer than anyone else talking about it. So how did that happen?
Um, I got my start working on AI about 20 years ago or so. And I was working for this consulting company that was in two lines of business. One of them was management consulting, strategy consulting.
Mhm.
They recruited me right out of business school for that line of business. And the other line of business was what they called data mining.
Okay.
And it turned out that we were okay at strategy consulting. We would compete with, I don't know, McKinsey, Bain, et cetera. We were a little bit cheaper.
Mhm.
Um, but the work that this company was doing in data mining was 5, 10 years ahead of its time. And so I was hired for business number one, and I switched to business number two as soon as I could, because I was just shocked and amazed at what they were doing. And back then, there were no language models. It was all, the work was done in SAS, and it was, everything was really slow. I started building marketing and risk models for one of our biggest clients was American Express. So American Express, um, it's not that they didn't use any math.
Mhm.
It's that before we came on the scene, they would use, let's say, to make a decision about whether to give you a line of credit or not, they would use a really simple model like linear regression or logistic regression or something like that. And we came in the early aughts, early 2000s, and we basically brought forward, like, so linear regression was invented, I don't know, in 1870s, 1860s, was used by some statisticians, maybe even older than that. Logistic regression is from the 1960s. And American Express in the year 2000, they were using like 40 to 140-year-old technology.
Mm.
And we came in and we proposed new modeling techniques that had been invented in like 1998. And so it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was just, it was bringing a tank to a knife fight. It was completely unfair. The new techniques worked way better
Of course, yeah.
than linear regression, and so they were able to get much better statistical results for all sorts of decisions, like who should get credit, how much credit should they get, who do you target the marketing proposal to, who should get to the front of the queue when they call for help, all sorts of resource allocation decisions. And it was an eye opener for me. Like I was just, um, I was talking to customers, I was during the day, and I was learning the math at night, and I was having a lot of fun. And then it turned out that the business of strategy consulting, at least my perspective of it, shifted, and the perspective of my clients shifted from like sort of the traditional management consulting is top down. Your client asks you the big question: what should our strategy be over the next 5 years? And you start by researching the world, researching the market, researching this client, and you identify a couple of themes or a couple of really like big ideas,
Mhm.
and then you drill down into like how to do them, and you drill down into what do they mean for this business and for that business and for the third business, and then you translate that into kind of a marching orders, like how do you execute it month by month, etc. So that is, to me, that is like classic top-down pyramid principle management consulting. And I found that the paradigm had shifted from that to sort of bottom-up strategy consulting. What is bottom-up strategy consulting? You don't start by asking like big questions out of Wikipedia or out of like secondary research. You start by interrogating the data. What does the data say? And the data will, so first you figure out, you collect the data if you don't have it, or you buy it, and you interrogate it. And then the data gives you some hypotheses, you validate them. Once you have some hypotheses, then you do the rest of it, figure out, how to use them. And I found that model of consulting to be so much more satisfying than doing
I
sort
can
of
imagine.
top-down research, because when I would get questioned on something, I'd have backup. There'd be some, I'm a numbers guy. There'd be some scientific basis for what I'm saying. Now, it's not the only right answer. It's not the only way to do it, but it's a way that really worked for me, and it worked for more and more of my clients. And so I learned that way of thinking at this company, and then after the company grew, got acquired, I left and I started doing some of my own consulting, and this was the way that served me. But Ricardo, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have never seen like what's been happening in AI over the last year has just been completely different from the 19 years that preceded that.
I was just about to ask you about that because it feels that people, everyone's talking about AI now, and rightfully so, but they don't actually realize there has been a lot of growth up until this stage, right? Now it's just the point, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's actually quite a big chunk of ice underneath, the waves. So I was just about to ask you, what do you think is happening now? How do you see this? How impactful do you think the current uh, evolution of AI is for everything that we do?
I could tell you that the feeling that I get from
Mhm.
from being in this moment, I feel really fortunate, and it's very similar to the feeling that I remember having in like 1995 working in an internet company. I mean, it's it's really exciting, and at the same time it feels so early. It feels like there's we're trying to build these things, we're excited about these new capabilities, but there's so much left to do. Like there's just this wide open space, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg. It's like, if it's not even the first inning, it's like the first 5 minutes of the game. That's what it feels like to me. um, But in terms of like what actually happened, I mean, I don't have an especially contrarian view. I think the fact that ChatGPT is the fastest growing product in history,
Mhm.
and suddenly unlocked all of these capabilities and showed that you could just throw some more data and compute at this problem, get a magic moment, and now that toothpaste is out of the tube, and lots of other people are able to, replicate parts of it. It's very, very exciting. It feels like, um, to me, it feels at least as impactful as the creation of the internet,
Mhm.
and maybe at least as impactful as, maybe even bigger than that. Maybe it's electricity, maybe it's fire, but I'm quite optimistic about it.
I think it's going to be a new revolution, right? The same way we've had all these revolutions throughout history. I think we're at that stage where everything's going to change, and rightfully so, and for the best. I was listening to a famous podcaster the other day, and he was saying it's the same change we watch when people transition from having horses everywhere to having automobiles, and that happened,
Right.
overnight, right? It was night and day, and I think that's probably what's going to happen with this type of AI. Should we be concerned? Because there's a lot of if you read, I don't know, those type of weird newspapers and say, oh my god, AI is coming to take your job and this. But to be honest, I think we're at that stage where it's actually quite good. But should we be concerned? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually get asked that a lot, Ricardo. So I think that there are two future scenarios that could cause concern. And I think that they're actually very, very different from each other. And one really is worrisome and one isn't. So the first one is AI is going to take my job.
Yeah,
That is a very concerning future scenario. The second one is AI is going to take my freedom.
yeah, that's a good one.
Um, so I actually think that the first scenario where AI is going to take my job, it looks really concerning. It sounds really scary, but I actually think that that is the utopian scenario. There are a lot of jobs that I wish AI would take. There are a lot of, people that are doing jobs that are just going to be better done by a computer, and they're not going to be jobs for humans anymore. Like those humans are going to be much happier at not doing those jobs. I think also that when people are looking at that first scenario of AI is going to take my job, they stop visualizing it at the moment that the job is lost, but they, I don't think they fully appreciate all of the knock-on effects. So if AI takes all of these jobs, that means that it's going to be able to do these jobs better and cheaper. That means that the things that these jobs produce are going to become so much better and cheaper. So, imagine that you need a proofreader, or you need a lawyer, or you need an editor for this podcast, or a booker to help you find guests. So you could do a little bit better than me next time. Right.
I,
So,
I doubt we were going to do any better than you, and I think we've reached the pinnacle of the highest quality guest ever. But yes,
thank you, Ricardo. But you can imagine how, as an entrepreneur, you consume all of these services. Maybe you do them yourself. Maybe as you grow, you'll decide to outsource them. So today, your option is basically outsource it to a human, and
yeah,
hopefully they're good at what they do. And imagine that in that future, and maybe this future is not so far away, you can actually outsource it to a machine, and the machine does a really good job of booking guests for you. That means that there's going to be, um, the quality of your podcast goes up, the cost of producing it goes down. You get to keep more money from all the other sources of revenue that you have. The
yeah,
reason why you do this podcast, whether it's advertising or your other businesses, and so um, all the services that you consume get cheaper. You will feel richer. You will be richer.
for sure.
And it's not just you, it's like everybody that's consuming all of these white collar services, professional services, architects and lawyers and designers and programmers, and all these things become cheap. So to me, if you zoom out on that society, it means that all the things that we need become really cheap. So we will feel very rich. Like, just imagine you're now a billionaire, and all these things that you want to buy, they don't mean anything. The prices don't mean anything to you. You can afford as much as you want. And so I think that's a world where there's huge deflation. The prices of lots of goods and services drop because the AI is doing them more efficiently. If there's so much deflation, that means, basically we all feel richer, even if we don't make the numbers might not be higher. It's not like my income went up, but my expenses went down, and so I feel richer and I am richer. And I think in that world, just fewer people need to work. So in that world, I think that those people who lost their jobs,
Mhm.
um, maybe they'll find other jobs, developing, something that's higher value. Some of them will become, maybe instead of being a lawyer, you might be an engineer training law chatbots or something like that. But it's not necessarily like not everybody's going to switch. Some people will become artists because basically whatever change they have left in their pocket is enough to live on. And as a society, I also think that we'll be able to afford to support these people because we will have so much, because all these things become cheaper. So I think that world is a world where, there's going to be something like universal basic income, and we'll just be able to take care of all these people. It's
That's a
not going to be a problem.
controversial topic right there. That is one of those that you never know how it's going to go, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I was just thinking about something that people being scared about all this transformation and how it's going to impact. I think people fail to realize that they can actually upskill themselves by using AI. Because,
Yeah.
for example, you think about tutoring, and you're in school, you're trying to learn something. The teachers are not, that good. Nowadays, you can probably go on YouTube, can probably go on Google and find the right information, but it never really does explain it to the level of detail you need to. However, one ChatGPT, it will tell you exactly what you need to do, how you need to do it. So it just opens up possibilities, right? It's a bit like having access to books in the 15th century with a printing press. It'll be the same thing, the same change, right? So
I really like that, Ricardo. I would say it's like going from a world where you have access to books
mhm,
to a world where you have access to a tutor, like a really good tutor that knows you. The tutor knows what you like and what you don't like, whether you like, maybe you like learning by reading or by listening or by watching things, and it knows what you're strong at and what you're weak at, and it basically helps you. It's a personalized tutor. So that personalized tutor is, it's very expensive in the pre-AI world. Only a few people can afford one. But in the post-AI world, everybody could, learn that way, and yeah, it can be very effective.
Now, we were talking about some of the dangers of AI, which is also a very hot topic. So, what do you think will be like in terms of governments using it and everyone being repressed, and we have killer robots walking down the street? Which, by the way, it's people are absolutely crazy when they say that. But what do you think? Those are some of the things we should be concerned about because there is quite a lot of capabilities, and I know some of it, but I'm pretty sure you know a lot more about it than I do. Should we be concerned about it or not at all?
Ricardo, I may be one of those crazy people. I am pretty concerned about it, actually. So when we talked about the two scenarios before, where the first scenario is AI takes my job, and the other scenario is AI takes my freedom, I'm really, really worried about that scenario. There's a couple of different ways that AI can be used to take our freedom. And um, the simplest way to think about it is the Terminator scenario. So
Yeah.
we've all seen the movies. Approximately every future science fiction story about AI is a disaster story, and it's really scary. And working with this technology, I cannot tell you that it's like there's no way for it to happen. Like I can't push that probability down to zero, and it's very, very scary. Now it's not like I'm not losing sleep over it, but I think that there's a real chance that it's called takeoff, where the capabilities of AI, they kind of grow and grow and grow, and then they suddenly take off at a rate that is just too fast for the scientists to contain. I think it's a real risk. I'm worried about it. Um, and also, even if you ignore takeoff, even if takeoff is too science fiction to think about,
Mhm.
AI is the kind of technology where, which is, it's really asymmetrical. Um, it's not like nuclear power, for example. So, if you're worried about nuclear proliferation, um, to create a nuclear bomb requires the resources of a nation state. It's incredibly difficult. You need to set up this enrichment program. You need really high grade scientists and equipment and all these. You have to buy these things that are not available for sale. And so it takes so much money and so much time that only a few countries in the world have been able to do it. And those countries have been able to contain this technology to some extent. It's not perfect either. AI is not like that. AI, it's, as an individual, you can have a breakthrough. Like today, we're not too late. We're early enough in the process where an individual can publish a paper and invent something that nobody's ever thought of, and that thing significantly increases the capabilities of the state of the art of what you can do with AI. I can give you lots of examples of papers like that. But from a risk perspective,
Yeah.
just imagine that a single scientist could invent something that makes, I don't know, that makes nuclear bombs more destructive or more attainable. That would be scary, right? So with AI, it's not just that an individual can create a breakthrough to increase the power. It's also that training these large models and all of the infrastructure around AI is getting cheaper at a very, very fast rate. So um, so it's really asymmetrical. By the way, I should mention these ideas are not mine. I read a book that I'd like to recommend to you and your
Please, yeah, that'd be
viewers.
great. Yeah.
The book is called The Coming Wave. It's written by Mustafa Suleyman, who is one of the co-founders of DeepMind,
Okay.
Google DeepMind. And it's mostly a book about what can go wrong, and the last 10% of the book are about what we can do about it.
I was just about to ask
So
you about it because it's great.
yeah, yeah. So it's a really interesting book. In the last chapter of that book, he talks about a framework for defending against these problems, and it's I'm not going to do it justice, but it's these concentric circles. It's the way that you design any kind of security system is not a single barrier or a single line of defense, but many, so that if you breach the external line of defense, you have the internal one, you have the internal one, and it's like a bullseye.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I don't remember all of them, but one of them starts very, very close to the researchers, and it basically says that every model should have a built-in auditing system that describes what the model does and is available to not just the team researching it, but to other people that want to inspect that model. So it's kind of like you should be able to have like a little diagnostic, like you have a diagnostic port on your car. You
Mhm.
can plug in a USB or something, and the
I
car will
think
tell you.
yeah, all cars have it since
All
1990.
cars, right? That's right. So the car will tell you kind of how it's feeling,
Yeah.
if some things are rusty, some things are according to spec or not. So what he suggests is that there should be, and it's a standard port, like the same USB thing will work on any car and can read data in the same. Cars have standardized on this. So he's suggesting that should be a diagnostic port on AI models, whether that model is built, by OpenAI or Anthropic or by WeChat. Um, there should be a standard way to inspect them. Another wider sort of circle that he talks about is that all AI labs should run and publish their test results in a way that in a public place, so that individual researchers can inspect those results and spot any kind of problem. So there would be like some kind of protocol, they publish it, and you and I can go check that ream of data and see if we, and it adds transparency. So he basically has like, 6 or 7 or 8 of these concentric circles, and they go all the way from the individual team up to something that requires the society to make an investment. But I hope some of these things come true. I hope that these mechanisms get adopted.
How do you prevent nation states, or well, nation? How do you prevent certain countries from developing capabilities like this? Is there a way of controlling it, or not at all? Because right now, as you rightfully said, you're talking about nuclear. nuclear technology, and we know there are certain constraints about getting uranium, getting plutonium, then enriching them, and we can track that via satellite, seeing, okay, you have this, it came from that source, so forth, so on. How do we stop countries like, I'm going to give North Korea? I hope I never go to North Korea because then I won't be allowed in. I'll probably get stuck there. But how do we prevent, countries like North Korea from creating capabilities that would um, scare us all? So how do we stop that?
Yeah, it's a serious question, Ricardo. I don't have an answer. I think that the only way to compel nation states to do something is through some kind of an international treaty and political pressure. And there's no magic bullet here. Some of these things require very, very broad agreement and broad coalitions
Yeah,
to make something happen. But not all of it. So there's some things that we could just start doing the right thing locally, and there are some things that just will require massive agreement and will probably take a while. In that sense, I think that this problem is not unlike it's not unlike the environmentalist movement. We have to take care of our planet, and how do we force the worst polluter to stop polluting? Well, it's going to be really hard to force
it's
the
very
worst
hard.
polluter, but it doesn't mean that we should just like throw up our hands and say, well, if China is going to keep polluting in such and such province, it means that I don't have to worry about the environment at all. So you,
Exactly.
you kind of you take whatever steps you can. You start with your own bed, right? You make your bed, keep you lower your own carbon footprint. You think personally, and then you think about your circle of friends, your local community, and you kind of grow from there.
But then the question would be, because we can always, the way we present ourselves and the way we organize ourselves, it is done in respect with our values, right? And rightfully so. However, when we are living in a global society, the other fellow might not have the same values and they might not respect the same thing. So it's a bit like going to war. When you do go to war, you need to be aware that your enemy might not have the same rules of engagement. They will not, comply with the Geneva Convention, for example. So they'll fight in a very dirty way. How do we stop it from happening? Right? It creates this dilemma. It's going to be tricky, no?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tricky, Ricardo. I wish I had a quick answer for you, but I think that the stakes of solving this with AI are very, very high.
Hmm.
Because if we don't get it right in warfare,
Yeah,
then the risk is that there's going to be a war that doesn't follow the rules, and it's really going to hurt the combatants in that war.
yeah,
The risk, if we don't get it right in AI, the risk is that there is AI takeoff
yeah.
or an AI weapon, and it just wipes us out. I mean, I think it's an existential risk for the planet. It's not unlike global warming.
A question on that. So there's I guess a gap right now between the I guess the online space and the actual physical capabilities of AI, right? We
Mm.
don't have killer robots yet. How do you think all these bad nation states will be able to produce, for example, killer robots, or have that enough technology to actually disrupt this fully, or we're still very, very far away? Because we look at that company, what's it called, Boston Dynamics? Is it Boston Dynamics? And they're
Sure.
producing all those advanced robots. Robots. And when I think of, okay, let's incorporate AI here, it's quite powerful. But then I also know that other countries don't have it, so that makes me feel a little bit safer at night. Do you think that that transition will be easy or not?
No, it definitely won't be easy. And also, I think where I'm getting a little bit away from my expertise. So most of the work that I've been doing has been for commercial AI, in the business world, and it's mostly been with text. So I haven't had a lot of personal experience with robots or
Yeah,
weapons. Um, but I can tell you that, uh, autonomous weapons, AI weapons that can actually make the decision to pull the trigger, they exist. Several nations have them, including the U.S., and it's a really scary thing. And there's this, the arms race is pushing a lot of the participants to
mhm,
be ever less careful and put ever more powerful weapons into the field. That's the way it's always been. But this is yeah, it's a very scary kind of race here, and I hope that we pull back from the brink.
So on that note about not arms race or anything like that, but about AI and technology,
Yeah,
well, you're also a mentor for tech stars. I was
yeah.
just asking, do you think that a startup can still exist without AI on something that they do, or that's completely off to, now you need
Um,
everything needs to be around AI?
I heard a recent statement from a venture capitalist. I think it was in Sequoia or maybe A16Z or one of those large funds, and they said that over 90% of incoming pitches are AI related. So I guess it's possible, but pretty slim. Um, it's I think part of it is kind of supply and demand. There's a lot of capital looking for AI ideas, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to be where the capital is going.
Yeah, that makes sense. But would you so because I know you also teach people and then help them out. So, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur just launching their startup in terms of incorporating AI into their idea?
Um, I think that AI is a tool. It helps you achieve certain things. It helps you maybe get where you're going, but it doesn't help you decide where you're going. It's not a destination. It's not a it doesn't produce value by itself. It helps you produce the value that you want to produce. So it's a means to an end. It's technology. It's not a product,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So my advice to the entrepreneur, if the entrepreneur tells me, actually, I recently had this. I had a startup founder that told me, look, I built this AI-based product, and it's really cool. It has all of these technologies in it, and I'm having like a lot of trouble selling it. It's not really getting the kind of pickup, market traction that I'm looking for. So, what should I do? Should I maybe like raise some money, maybe lower my price, maybe fix my ad, maybe I should take on a partner? Like, how do I fix it? And the problem with that question is that um, users don't really care if you're using AI or not. Maybe investors do, but users don't care. Users have certain pain points, and as entrepreneurs, it's our job to fix those pain points
Mhm.
using whatever means, whatever legal means we can come up with.
Yeah,
Um, and it just so happens that a lot of problems could probably be fixed with the application of these new capabilities that just got unlocked.
Mhm.
But the user doesn't care whether we're using a new way to fix it or an old way to fix it. They just care that it's fixed. So the advice to the entrepreneur is, before you decide that you want to build something with AI,
Mhm.
talk to talk to users and make sure that you're building something that they would want, and then you figure out how to build it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In terms of raising investment, because I know you're also in space, how hard it is, how hard do you think it is right now to raise investment overall? Because here, for example, in UK, a lot of people are complaining, "Oh my God, it's been so hard, and no one's investing. Money's really tight." We know for a fact that in the US, rounds are at least 5 times bigger than in the UK, which is great. Our minimum round is 250K, and that's really a lot of money. Whereas in the US, it's around 1 million. So how is that working? What's the current status?
Okay, so there's two questions there. There's the US versus UK or US versus other countries, and there's also how hard is it now versus how hard was it before.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, so for the second question, I think that valuations for private companies, for startups, have generally come down in the US over the past like maybe 6 months, 12 months. And you can see that in a lot of investors that have sort of mark-to-market accounting. They have taken down the marks of their private investments, and it's also, it's more difficult to raise money now than it was maybe 6 or 12 months ago. Not necessarily a bad thing. There was just like such a mania going on, but but it's still, there's still a lot of VC investments. There's still a lot of VCs that have dry powder, and there's still a lot of capital looking for AI opportunities. Um, in terms of the U.S. versus other countries, it's a really good question, and I don't have a lot of expertise there, but there's there's something special about the Bay Area ecosystem and what they've created, what over the past, whatever, 30, 40, 50 years.
Mhm.
And I know that a lot of other countries have tried to replicate it, and it's been elusive. It's not that nobody else has succeeded, but the scale is, it's tough to replicate. I can't tell you that I know exactly what it is, but, something about the physical proximity of a couple of universities and all of these capital providers. It's like a magnet. It's like a self-reinforcing system, and it seems to work. I also think that there's something in there's something about cultures that are they're just different. Something about the value of the individual and versus the value of a group and the value of society, and there's the U.S. makes different choices than other countries do, and those choices have pluses and minuses. So maybe the entrepreneurial ecosystem is a plus, but hey, we have one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world, and
Yeah.
to a lot of other people who live in a lot of other countries, it's crazy that you have to go shopping for dentists, and you have to like haggle with your pharmacist about how much to pay for medication. But that happens in the U.S. all the time, and it doesn't happen in any other advanced economy. So there's definitely trade-offs.
That's always a big shock. I was talking with a friend of mine who travels to the US on a frequent basis. He also has family there. And we're talking about esomeprazole, which is the medicine you take for it's a stomach protector. And he was saying I had to get a prescription there in the States, and it was like $700.
Yeah,
Whereas in here, I literally can go to my supermarket and buy it, and it'll be £2. So very, very cheap.
right.
And
That's right.
it's a bit of a shock. Um, Another question I have is, would you advise someone coming in from Europe and say, you know what, just go to the US and try and raise some funds there? Or do you think automatically they'll be shut down and say, oh, where are you coming from? The UK, France, whatever, Germany? Yeah, we don't tend to invest in European companies because it's a legal minefield, or we don't trust you to do things the right way.
You know, I don't think that switching countries is the right move for most entrepreneurs. I think that um, the biggest problems are around building something that people want. It's achieving product market fit. If you are able to achieve product market fit, the capital will come to you, even if it has to come overseas. So I think that over the past 20, 30 years, um, I think, even if you look at U.S. capital, that there's just a lot more investment overseas, and that they're looking for deals in much, much bigger places. Certainly, broader than the Bay Area, and I think that concentration is decreasing. It's diffusing. Um, I know that there's not as much capital available to entrepreneurs in more conservative countries, and but I think that if let's say if you're in France, if you're in Germany, if you're in the UK, and you have developed a product that has good traction that users really want, I think that you can raise the capital without moving. You,
If you
you may
had,
not be able to raise it from
yeah,
from local investors that are down the street, but I
yeah.
think that it is possible to do.
If you had, and this is going to be a very tricky question, I realize that. If you had just one piece of advice to give to an entrepreneur, what would that be?
Build something people want.
That's a good one. That's super solid. Yeah, yeah. That's because I think sometimes you meet a lot of people who are building this fantastic idea in their mind, and then they realize actually no one wants this. What am I going to do with this? And the same happens quite often with software companies, where they build this product that they think the market's really going to need, and that they didn't hear the market, and the market said, "Why did you spend a couple million here? Because that's not for us. That's no one's going to use it." Um, as we're closing to the end of our podcast, if people want to reach out to you, how can they do so?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. It's Alon Bochman, ALON BOCHMAN. And just drop me a note. I respond to everybody that reaches out to me.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been super insightful.
Thank you, Ricardo. Take care.
Thanks. All right. Let me just